Is it a thing? Maybe. I think I am live, but I'm probably, other than those of you all who are watching this recording and catching it right from the top of the hour, I'm waiting for my friends to find their way in because we had to set up a new live stream at the last minute. There we go. Chemicals here. Sweet. So am I live? Can you see me? I'm at home. I'm like with a whole different rig today. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but glad to be doing it with you guys. There we go. PK's in the house. All right. You guys can see me. Let me get my Resolve set up while everyone finds their way in. Thanks for bearing with my tech insanity, guys. It's always something, right? Give me 1 sec here so I can get teed up to do Resolve stuff. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? I'm glad to be with you guys. How's it feel to be looking at me on a webcam? I was like, oh, I'll do grade school from home this morning. Then I realized I didn't have my camera at home this morning, so we're kind of going like MTV Unplugged style here. But I don't mind if you guys don't. Okay, let's figure out how I can share my screen with y'all. There we go. It's all happening. And now we're going to do a little bit of this. Okay. I think I'm good. I'm on a different version of OBS that shows me all kinds of cool stuff too. Okay, hi guys, good to see y'all. Sorry for the bumpy start. Glad to be with you. How is everyone? Happy day after Father's Day to all my dads out there. Any dads in the house? Put your hands up. Dad here. I had a good day yesterday. Hung out with my kiddos and my lady. We went to Disneyland. Spoiler alert, hot tip. Any dads out there brave enough to brave Disneyland on Father's Day or any other day for that matter? Father's Day is a good day to go to Disneyland. I don't think there's a lot of dads going in for Disneyland on that day. I feel like there's a lot of dads who are like, see you guys later, I'm going to go golf, which I wouldn't have minded doing, but I'm glad that we chose to go to Disneyland instead. It was like the quietest day I've ever spent at Disneyland, and I've spent a few days at Disneyland, as some of y'all may know. So we had a really fun day at Disneyland. We met Minnie Mouse, we went on the carousel, lots of fun kid stuff. Anyway, I hope my dads out there had a good dad's day. And dogs 100% count, John. Absolutely. What do you guys want to talk about today? I'm frustrated that we had to start a brand new live stream here because I thought I saw like I caught like the fastest glimpse of like some really good questions and topic suggestions in the chat for the prior live stream. So drop those in again. We're going AMA style today. Anything is fair play today. So let's have some fun. Like I said, I'm here at home. I'm kind of like improvising here today because I was going to... First, I improvised by saying I'm going to do grade school from home, and then I realized I didn't have my camera here. So I'm kind of making it up as I go along. And I also had to set up a brand new Resolve project, but it's kind of fun because we get some new images to look at, which is always a fun thing. So I'm getting my Resolve set up here, and then I'm going to take y'all's questions. I also don't, at the moment, have a co-host, so it's just us. It really is like, like a throwback to like first ever episode of grade school that I did on my laptop, looking at my webcam, reading the chat out myself, and those were fun sessions. So a little bit of that vibe today. I hope you guys don't mind. Okay, cool. Let's get a look at this chat. Let's pop this chat out so I can see y'all a little bit better. Okay. Whoa, Nathan's in the house. Okay, what's up, buddy? Glad y'all are here. Glad you're here. Okay, yeah, we got my gang in place here now. I love it. Okay, let's see what's going on out there. What do you guys want to talk about? Yeah, what did you do, Tim, for Dad's Day? 5th birthday. Man, look at you go. Okay. All right, so let's see. Okay, so Chemical, you've been struggling handling footage to an Unreal artist who is requiring linear for Unreal. Oh, that's fun. Well, as long as you know the tenets of color management, like let's look at, let me tap over into Resolve here real quick. And let's see what's what. So delivering linear for Unreal, that in theory should be as simple as, like if you're color managing the way that I am here in this timeline, and I've got input color space of, whatever my camera metric is. I'm going out right now to Rec 709. Let's flip that to Gamma 22. Oh, can I turn my reference monitor on? Let's pretend like we're actually grading. I don't have a look in place yet, but we'll get there. Theoretically, all you should have to do is either at your timeline level or elsewhere. I'm just creating a brand new serial node here. You can deliver whatever color space they want if they're specifying a color space, but you could do, say, keep it DaVinci wide gamut and just flip it to linear, and then you would just turn all this other stuff off. And that should be it. This would linearize your image. That's assuming you're color managing. That's assuming you know your color space metric, all of which are important things, of course. But as long as you have those pieces in place, then we've effectively turned our 2, 7, or 9 node into a 2 lin node, and then you could render this out. So hope that's some helpful breadcrumbs anyway. Okay, what else we got? I gotta get this chat way bigger. We're gonna need a bigger boat. Okay, let's see. Benjamin, oh, here's a good one. What method or tools would you use to broadly match 2 cameras used on set? I'm really glad this question's coming up because it gives me a chance to talk about this in a way that I've wanted to for a while. So here's what I would say. The method that I would use to broadly match 2 cameras used on set is color management. And that's like both a sort of endorsement of color management and also a like admission that color management is not going to get you an identical match between 2 cameras because it's doing very simple linear transformations to align primaries essentially. But that would be my answer, is assuming you know the color space of camera A and of camera space B. I would use color management as my baseline, and then I would grade through the rest of it. Again, tons of details, like different ways that could go, different other discrepancies there might be, like if one camera was rated for 5600 and the other was rated for 4000 Kelvin, like a million different variables there. But that would be kind of the broad answer, is like let color management do that broad match for you. You could look at using a color checker. We've got a dedicated video on that if there are color checkers in your footage. But at a baseline, use color management to get your foundation. And then you should feel like really set free, unless it's like worlds apart and really feels like a overwhelming challenge. You should feel like equipped at that point to deal with the rest of it in your grade. Oh, this needs to be a little bit warmer, warm it up. That feels a little bit, like heavier on the contrast, pull back on the contrast. Like whatever it is, you should be in a good enough spot and you should feel empowered enough that you can simply grade through whatever remains in most cases. All right, what else? Okay, Alvaro, here's a good one. In your opinion, what do you think would be the appropriate order within the node structure of the halation effect when we want to add it as an element in film emulation? Yeah, let's talk about some halation. So, as you guys can see, I'm in Resolve 19, which is cool because we can play around with Resolve 19. If anybody has Resolve 19 questions, we can kick those around. Let's get a look in place. I'm just going to pull something from my Voyager Essentials here. I'm going to pull Nelvana. I really like Nelvana. And so Alvaro's question is about where would we place halation? And we've really got 2 options there. I mean, we've got lots of options, but there's 2 fundamental options. And there's actually an image right here in the timeline that I think is going to be a really good demo for halation. So option A, by the way, for my halation, I am going to use the new film LUT creator. I have mentioned here on the channel before, I'm very excited by the film LUT creator. I think there's a lot of good stuff to say about the film LUT creator. Maybe what I'm most excited by are the spatial, or what the plugin calls the effects of this plugin. I'm actually less interested in the color pieces, although there's some interesting things there. I'm more interested in the effects side of things, and in particular the halation, which is completely different, feels completely different than the halation that is like available inside of Resolve's, like the dedicated halation plugin that has been around in Resolve for a little while. So if we look at how much we want to do, let's just go really heavy so it's easy for you guys to see here on YouTube. And I'm going to zoom in and endeavor to remember that you're not looking at this on my same big reference monitor on my right. So like, I think this is a really nice halation in general. So just as a general sort of guidance, I would say if you're looking for a free form of halation right within Resolve, Film LUT Creator is a great place to look for that. But to go back to the question, Alvaro is asking, like, all right, where should we place our halation? So what's the difference if we have halation here versus, say, as the very first thing in our grade? Let's actually move this. I'm tapping on this node and hitting Command C. I'm now going to delete this. I'm going to go to my clip level, and let's bring in a node tree, like so. I'm going to connect up this disconnected node, which is a weird thing that happens sometimes. And we're just going to audition two things. Bachelor number 1, halation here at the end, right? Now, is that also, why am I seeing, let's turn off all this other stuff. I don't need bloom. I don't need grain right now. No flicker, no gate weave, no film gate. Let me get my mouse in place here so I can do this a little faster. And that one I already turned off, right? Yeah, okay, cool. So we should just be looking at halation now, which is having more effect. Oh, you know what else I need to check, because this is a brand new project. Do I have my color management tagged properly? Okay, I do. Yeah, I'm seeing this, it's blurring the overall image a little bit more than I would want to see. I'm wondering if there's a way to, I'm just going to tighten in that radius. Okay, that's fine for our purposes here. So for our halation, let's just go strong again with it here. We could do this here, or we could do this over here at the beginning. What's the difference? Who cares? Isn't it going to be identical? Like if we grab a still here, I'm just going to stay zoomed in here so it's easy to see. And if we instead paste this here and I wipe, let me make sure I'm wiping full frame. Like so. Isn't that going to be identical? It's the same image, right? Where we'll start to get a difference is if we are now making our exposure changes, like say here on the prime node here. If I'm doing like, say, I don't know, my HDR global, I want to bring this in a little bit. What does that mean? Let's just think about this one specific example. Essentially the question is, do we do the halation and then grade, or do we grade and then do we do the halation? You could also stick it anywhere inside of your stack, but I think the first question is, which of those bookends are you more interested in? If you do everything at the end here, essentially you are modeling more of what you would get from a you are modeling, you're normalizing for your exposure, right? You're saying, I'm getting the halation I would have gotten if this image had been exposed and graded exactly how I am grading and exposing it here, right out of the can. Does that make sense? Whereas if you put it here, then you are baking in the halation that as it responded to the original image. So even though I've pulled exposure here, I'm actually not reducing halation, because the halation was applied when the exposure was hotter and when more of this image area, for example, was receiving halation. As opposed to, and let's just grab a still of that, okay? So we'll compare this here. You can see, like, even as I pulled it in, that bloom or that halation in her hair is still there, versus if I turn that off and I do this here, now I am getting a difference, right? Still pretty subtle over YouTube, but like this is, halation itself is pretty subtle when it's done well, right? Like that's a significant difference. It's because I'm applying one upstream versus one downstream. So the question is, do you want your halation to respond to your graded normalized exposures, or do you want your halation to be more like what you would get with if it had been part of the film negative of your camera and it just responded however it responded, and you're pulling it in, you know, or pulling it up and you're maintaining whatever that response was in the layers? No wrong answer there. My answer tends to be, for me personally, I like to have a kind of like a uniform level, so I like to apply it after everything's already been done, but you could explore both, and that would be kind of like the basis on which I would do so. All right, what else? David, how do we get grading jobs? Quick plug for the Colorist Career Accelerator course. We've got a couple of Colorist Career Accelerator alums here in the room today. CCA alums, let them know. Was it fun? Was it terrible? Did you get anything out of it? Did you learn how to get grading jobs from the course? That's definitely one of the big emphases of the Colorist Career Accelerator course, is how do you build a business, not just in terms of like how do you build your craft, but how do you get your clients, how do you keep your clients, how do you get the best billing from your clients that you can, all of that business dimension of stuff that I feel like I learned that much later than I learned color grading. So that's a good dedicated venue to learn those things. Tough to distill down to a single conversation here on YouTube, but you know, a couple principles that you can think about there. The first one would be like, this sounds obvious, but be really good at what you do. If you're really good at what you do, it's at a certain point difficult for people not to notice, right? Like this sounds, it's an extreme example, but like for Michael Jordan's level of basketball talent, if he was just going around playing basketball, how likely do you think it is that he would have gone completely undiscovered and had no career? Like at some point, someone would have been like, we should be making money together because you're really good at this. Like, you should be playing professionally. It's an extreme example, but the same kind of thing. If you're really good at what you do and you're doing it even a little bit, sooner or later, someone's going to notice. I'm not saying that's sufficient for building the color grading career that you always want to have, but it's a really good baseline. And then within there, a lot of it comes to your personal style and the market that you're in and where you're comfortable and what you, the way you want to attract your clients to you. But that would be one thing right there is just focus on being the very best at what you can do that you're able to be. And lots of other stuff that we could talk about, but probably more suitable for the Colorist Career Accelerator course or for even a dedicated chat here in grade school, which we've done in the past, and I'm game to do again. Okay. Ooh, mastering white point. That's a deep one, Timu, that I want to do justice to, so I don't know if we'll bite that one off today. I will say there's a really good video on mastering white point that Filmlight put out on their Vimeo channel that I just recently rewatched. That is definitely worth checking out. So go Google around for that if you're interested in the topic, and that would actually be a great thing to chop up. Like, I feel like that would almost be a pre-recorded video and a grade school session before I'd feel like we're doing the topic justice, because it's a big one. All right, what else we got? Coloring outdoor sports, that's an interesting one. Lots of things you can't control, such as constantly changing lighting and limited positioning. Yeah, so I'll give you easily my least popular piece of advice that I give to colorists in this setting and in lots of other settings. Lower your expectations. You guys, I feel like I drop this quote like every couple of grade schools almost at this point, but there's a great quote in a movie called Michael Clayton, which I love, by the way, or a great line, I should say, in Michael Clayton, where George Clooney's character says, "The math here is simple. I'm a janitor. The bigger the mess, the easier." Now I want to get the line right. He says, "The smaller the mess, the easier it is for me to clean up." Essentially, same thing goes for color grading. If it's more far flung, if stuff is moving around and it's tougher to match, and things are overexposed and underexposed and inconsistent, you're not going to be able to do as good a job as if the negative was stronger. Like, that sounds so obvious to say, but it can be helpful to repeat to ourselves, like, hey, I'm just trying to do what I can, but my expectations need to be a little bit lower than thinking like, oh, I can single-handedly brute force this into being the same mastered image that I would have gotten if all the footage was gathered pristinely. Not the case, obviously. So that's, like I said, probably my least enjoyed piece of advice to colorists who are struggling with that. But whether it's your context or another one, sometimes lowering your expectations is what's needed. Like, all right, what can I do here? What fundamentals can I bring to the table, and how can I make everything as good as possible without making any of it worse, if that makes sense? Okay. Isaac, have you given a try to the Tetra DCTL, which is an approximation to what Steve Yedlin does on Nuke for LookDev? I have given a try to the Tetra DCTL. I think there's some interesting opportunity in the Tetra DCTL. I think what you'll find, what I found and what I know is the case for Steve, having talked to him about this tool, it's actually works better as more of a color correction tool than as a look development tool. It's pretty linear and pretty limited for being a look dev tool. You can use it for that purpose. I have, but fundamentally it's not ideally suited to the purpose for a variety of reasons. So I would actually encourage Tetra more as a as a color correction tool than as a look development tool. Like, specific example that was given to me directly from Steve Yedlin that I just happened to recall. So he was talking about during the grade for Knives Out, they had a scene where a character was sitting quite close to a fireplace and there was firelight illuminating them. And what they did to correct out some of the excess red is they pulled some of the red in red within the Tetra DCTL. And by the way, let me see. I'm a little nervous about opening my DCTLs because I feel like I was in dev mode the other day and you guys are going to see a bunch of stuff you shouldn't. Okay, no, I hid things away appropriately. Let's see if I have Tetra living here somewhere handy. Oh, I've got Tetra HSV, which I really like. It's almost my preferred tool, but it's a different one. similar idea. I mean, we could look at this real fast. It's basically a way of controlling the color properties within the tetrahedra that make up a color cube. Let's find this thing here. There it is. So in the case of the example that I just gave, instead of red and red, so with this tool, you've got hue, sat, and value for each of your 6 tetrahedra, as opposed to red, green, and blue for each of your 6 tetrahedra. So in this case, the equivalent would be to pull out some red sat within the red tetrahedron, and you can see like it's powerful and it's focused, but like I mentioned, it's also quite linear. So I would not think of this anymore as a look dev tool, and I know that Steve doesn't either. I would think of it more as a color correction tool, personally. All right, what else we got? Oh, any thoughts on when we'll get an episode on how to get out to a display other than CST 70924, something like JP 2499? Yes, lots of thoughts on that. We are overdue. We are so overdue for like a deep discussion on DRTs. I love talking about DRTs. I love thinking about DRTs. 2499. JP, are you in the house right now? That's the one thing I can't see here in the chat. Oh wait, yes I can. Hang on. No, not at the moment. 2499 is a great one to call out because that's like probably my current favorite DRT. It's a really, really nice one. So yes, heard. Content on DRTs is coming. CSTs, I'll go on the record right now since we're talking about it and say in my grading practice, the path out to display that I use the least is CSTs. Sorry, Blackmagic. It's not that it's that bad, it's that there are some other really good solutions out there that have become my preference. So yes, more to come on that topic. Definitely lots to chop up and explore. Basically, like the cliff notes of it, as many of you guys already know, is like you can get out to display many, many different ways, none necessarily being more right or wrong than the other. It's just all about your creative intent and what works best for your images and for what your client wants and what works not quite as well. And what might cause problems too, in the case of certain viewing transforms. All right, what else we got? John, I'm a beginner colorist living in South Louisiana. What steps would you recommend taking to find some kind of mentorship opportunities living so far away from a major production hub? Yeah, so that's a great question. Here's what I would say, John. Like I'll give you my take here. You need to make yourself, like I talk over and over again about how important mentors are. You guys have heard me talk, I'm sure, about how important mentors have been to me in my color grading career. But what I will also say is that every mentor I have had, I have proven myself worthy of mentorship to them. That doesn't mean that I showed them how great I was or showed them how skilled I was at color grading, but I did signal to them repeatedly, consistently, I am very serious about this. I'm putting in the time and the effort on my own to learn this, and I would benefit from and really appreciate the support of a great mentor, if that makes sense. So like, it's kind of like goes back to our question earlier about like, oh, how do we book color grading jobs? The best thing you can do to find a mentor, book color grading jobs, attain so many of the outcomes or the results that we're looking for in our journey as colorists is to just focus on being excellent at what you do. That's actually something we talk about in the Colorist Career Accelerator course. Like that's one of my big like sort of themes that I emphasize. Don't just be good, don't just be decent, be excellent at what you do. Like work really, really hard at maxing out your ability to make images look beautiful and your knowledge and your like body of techniques that allow you to do that. When you do that, you're going to start to attract clients. In the case of our earlier question, that's also energetically and practically what you need to do to make yourself attractive to a mentor. And at that point, you're going to start to identify, like I can give you guys this example. I live in Los Angeles. I've lived in Los Angeles or in a slightly smaller, like film market, but still a decent sized one, Austin, Texas, for most of my adult life. And there are many, many colorists who in this field who I admire, whose careers I look up to, who I respect, who I would not have necessarily wanted for mentors, and I'm not looking for mentorship from now. Mentorship is a sacred thing. Mentorship is very specific, and it involves like a real sort of like, you need a very special fit between both sides of that. So the mentors that I've had, I found like, you know, my greatest mentor in my career, Dr. Mitch Bogdanowicz, I found Dr. Bogdanowicz because of the specific things that I was interested in and had been pursuing for long enough that we had a unique alignment. I wasn't just, hey, I'm a you know, like a newer colorist and I'm looking for a really senior experienced colorist to like help build me up. It was more like, hey, I am a very color science fixated colorist and I love understanding the math and the science, and I love understanding the chemistry of film, and I love understanding the way that film systems rendered such preferred aesthetics so consistently. Those are the things that made me a uniquely good mentee candidate, if you want to call it that, to Dr. Bogdanowicz. I didn't just put my hand up and say, hey, you've achieved success in this field and I want to achieve success in this field. It was quite a specific fit. So that's kind of a tangent, but I hope that's some helpful ideas. Work on developing your skill and getting as good at what you want to do as you can, and also at figuring out like, hey, what do you love in this? Do you love working with clients? Do you love doing sales? Do you love the craft? Do you love grading? Do you love look development? Do you love building tools? Do you love coding? Do you love commercials? Do you love movies? There's so many different like corners of the sandbox to play in, and once you start finding your corner and getting good at playing in that corner, you're going to find other people who are even better at playing in that corner who say, come here, kid, I'm going to help you out. That's been my experience anyway. Okay, what else we got? Farba, I need to create a showLUT that would work for two cameras, the Arri Mini LF and the Arri Alexa 35, for in-camera use during shooting. Ooh, should we do it? Let's break it down. Let's have some fun. So there's two steps in this process. The first step is we need to create a lookup table that takes in the appropriate camera metric and does the stuff that we want after that and renders a Rec. 709 image, right? That's step one. We need two versions of that. One for Arri wide gamut 3 log C3, one for Arri wide gamut 4 log C4. That's just two .cube files. I can output those directly from Resolve, right? That's step one. I need two other things though, if I'm going to use specifically these cameras. Both of these cameras have their own proprietary camera specific formats that .cube LUT file needs to be converted into before it can be used in the camera itself, if you're talking about loading it into the camera. If that's the case, what you want to use for that is the Arri reference tool, is what it's called. I talk about how to do this for the Alexa 35 in a video that came out earlier this year. So I'm going to skip over that part of how to convert that cube to respectively a .alf4 or a .aml. That's just file conversion essentially, and that information is fairly available out there. Let's focus on the bigger portion of things, which is how do I actually create a transform for that camera. I'm going to show you guys how I like to do this. We're actually not very far away from that right now. But let's just clean up our node graph. And we're still looking at Resolve, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Let's clean up the node graph and let's just analyze what's happening to this image right now. Look at the group pre-clip level. We're going Arri wide gamut 3 log C3 into DaVinci wide gamut intermediate. Okay, cool. Clip level, nothing's happening. Group post clip level, nothing's happening. Timeline level, I'm applying a look, which is keeping me in DaVinci wide gamut. I really like that look. Do you guys like that? I think that looks great here. And then I'm applying a color space transform that's taking me from my working space and spitting me out, in this case, to Rec. 709 gamut 2.2. You might want to target 2.2, you might want to target 2.4, depending on your monitoring setup for production. But essentially, I've actually already got all the pieces in place that I need to build my camera LUT for my Alexa. For the Alexa 35, I'm not quite there yet. But let's just say we're going to take what we've got here and just go the rest of the distance to building out our Alexa Mini, or what did you say, Alexa Mini? Yeah, our Alexa log C3 LUT. All I'm going to do here is move all this stuff into the clip level temporarily, just because when you're building LUTs, you want to see the entire process spelled out. So I'm going to tap this node and hit Command C. I'm going to disable here at the group pre-clip level. I'm going to tap node 1 here in my clip level and hit Command V. Now I'm going to go over to the timeline level and do the same thing. And if you want to make this a little bit faster, I'm just going to right click this and hit grab still. I'm going to hit Option D to disable these nodes. We'll go back over here to the clip level. I'm going to right click this still that I just saved, or actually I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to drag this onto an empty node. And now I've got the same image I had a moment ago, same pieces I had a moment ago, but they're all living right here at the clip level, right? This is really important because when you're building looks, building LUTs, it's really easy to lose the thread of like, wait, what am I starting with? What am I doing along the way? And how am I finishing? And all those pieces are really important when we're generating LUTs. So essentially all you need to do is two things. First, make sure that you're doing what you want creatively to the image, and make sure that at the input stage, you're taking in the camera metric that you want your LUT to work for. And at the output stage, you are outputting the display metric that you expect to use this LUT on. Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, or Gamma 2.2 being the most common options there, right? So check and check, we're good. And then along the way, all I'm doing, this is the other part that we can't bite off here today. In the middle, what do we have? That's look development. This is one big way that look development is practiced, is building looks that are going to be used in LUTs that are going to go out to cameras and used on set, right? So we're not going to talk about look development in depth right now. I just happen to be using an off-the-shelf look that I really like for my Voyager Essentials pack here, and it's giving me a great look on all of my Alexa footage. If I paste it around between all these, that's looking really nice, right? Even between like these different genres and stuff. So this is it. This is my sequence. Here's the magic of LUTs. I've talked about this before, but one of my favorite words in all of like sort of color geekery is a word called concatenate. Do you guys know what concatenate means? Concatenate, I'm sure someone could give me a better formal definition, but concatenate basically just means smash all this stuff together. That's what LUTs can do. LUTs can represent a concatenation of these three processes. Process A takes me from wide gamut 3 log C3 to my working space. Process B applies a creative look in my working space. Process C takes me from my working space out to my display space. And I can simply by right-clicking on this thumbnail and hitting Generate LUT and saying 65 point cube, I can concatenate, or I can cook all of that down into a single LUT. And that's pretty cool. So we're going to call this, give it something descriptive. Say Nelvana log C3 to 709. Okay. And in order to verify before I kick this out that I'm getting sensible results, you should be looking at your LUT on material which is in the same metric as the destination camera. Does that make sense? So if I'm making something for an Alexa, then I want to be looking at Alexa footage. Otherwise, the correct answer is going to look incorrect because I'm applying a invalid pipeline to my images, right? So in this case, I'm doing that, so we're all good. Now here's what we need to do next. Let's work on our log C4 format. Log C4 or our log C4 LUT, very simple. All I'm going to do is go over here to this log C4 image so that I'll see when the image is right. Now you can see when I apply my log C3 sequence to this one, looks wrong because it's taking the wrong input metric in. What I want to do here is flip this, wide gamut 4, log C4, like so. And what I'm going to do here is turn my tone mapping to luminance mapping. There's a bigger discussion to be had there, but just take my word for it, at least at this point. So now I've got things teed up for my Alexa 35 scenario, and I can do the same thing. I can right click, generate LUT, 65 point cube, and I would call this Nelvana log C4 to 709. Okay, that'll get you started anyway. The next thing you need to do is get both of these over into the area reference tool and respectively create a .aml for the Alexa Mini or the Alexa Classic, whatever log C3 Alexa you're using. And then technically for the Alexa 35, you need to create not an ALF4, which is what I said a moment ago. You actually need to create what's called an ALF4C. I did a video, this is the same video that I mentioned earlier on the Alexa 35 that I did, that's allowing you to actually control the entire journey out to display space. If you just create an ALF4, then you're going to be handcuffed to Aries display transform that's going to be applied in camera. That's neither good nor bad. You just need to make accommodations or plans for doing that or not doing that according to your workflow. My 2 cents would be that the simplest way to do things would be the way to do things that we always have on an other camera, which is to go all the way from camera metric out to Rec 709. So that's what you would be teed up for here, and you simply need to make sure that you are in this scenario generating an ALF4C, not an ALF4, which is what I walked through in that Alexa 35 video that I've referenced a couple times. Okay, hope that helps. What else? Let's see. I love that you guys have like, I know I've mentioned this before, but like half the fun of grade school I feel like is the conversations that y'all have in the chat. All right, let's see. I lost my place here. John, is there an easy way of retaining color management while turning off all nodes in all clips? So camera source normalized to DaVinci wide gamut to 7 or 9, but grade off. Oh, so like essentially you're thinking about like a bypass grades, but where you would retain the baseline there. I can only tell you how I do that, which is, let's go back to our normal mode here of applying everything in pieces. The way that I do that is I can just, because I'm only doing grading here at my clip level, at any point I can disable that grade and I'm still going to see my color management expressed. I know that's not a particularly fancy answer, but that's the way that I solve for that. Is here at the clip level, I'm only doing clip level stuff and my color management happens kind of as bookends on either side of that. Okay, what else we got? Oh, the 5247. Jim Robinson likes it. You got good taste, buddy. That's a really good stock. I think, I mean, I do hear it discussed a fair amount. I just think it's slippery. Because here's the thing, like, what you and I like about 5247 is 5247 printed to, here's the other confusing thing about film. I'm pretty sure the print stock of that era was still 2383, but it wasn't the same 2383 that we use today. But point being, what you and I like about 5247 is really 5247 printed to 2383. 5247 in and of itself is sort of unknowable because it's just one half of a whole that we can only see as a whole. So I don't know why it's not talked about more. I don't feel like I hear, you know, like negative A versus negative B going through the same print. That's not a topic I hear being discussed much about any pair of negative stocks, just because it's hard to identify those color differences in terms of like overall difference, not just localized variations that we see on one shot versus another shot. So kind of a non-answer to you, but I'm game to talk more about any film anytime, and you got good taste. I think 5247, I think that's what they shot the entire original Blade Runner on, which is like one of the most effing beautiful movies of any time in film history that I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure that was 5247. If anyone knows that I'm right or wrong, then check me on that. Ooh, best practice for highlight recovery. This is from the Pixel Surgeon. HDR panel or rolling off to a reduced white point in curves? Yeah, great question. So the HDR panel can work really nicely for highlight recovery. I feel like we've been like partying with this shot here today, but it's a good shot to talk about highlight recovery. So let's go over to the HDR palette. We could totally go. By the way, I was today years old, or I was last week years old when I learned that you can see the zone that you're affecting in your HDR by turning on your highlight mode and turning the knob that you're wanting to change. Did you guys already know about this? I didn't know about this. I think that's pretty cool. So yes, you could totally do like your highlight or even your specular if you want to bring things in there. As some of y'all may know, I feel like I don't love the interaction between color and luminance that I get here. Like that might be this is a hard task that I'm asking of the tool, but the something about like the saturation here feels a little bit weird to me. So I would kind of want to hit it with some sort of 1-2 punch like this. For that reason, that tends to be why, like let's say I just want to bring in some of the heat on her hair and unlock maybe the window back there. That is the reason why I would tend more toward a custom curve solution, as you alluded to. So I'm just going to set a control point here and kind of bring that down on my own and drop another control point because this custom curves thing is goofy. Basically making sure that nothing is changing on the wrong side of the curve. So like something like that. That's would be my go-to. And full disclosure, I actually have DCTLs. Actually, some of my CCA alums, if you guys are still in the house, can vouch for this. I have DCTLs that basically like automate this process and make it a little bit more tactile and a little faster. That we usually, I don't want to necessarily promise it on the spot here, but I imagine we'll continue to share as a benefit of being part of the Colorist Career Accelerator course. But that's probably my go-to, is that tool that I'm talking about that effectively does this, but parameterized into a set of knobs that make it a little bit easier to quickly get what I'm after. But yeah, those are both good options, HDR zones versus custom curves. I like custom curves just because I feel like dropping all three channels feels a little bit more organic than like whatever kind of colorimetric fanciness is happening in the HDR zones, where it's trying to sort of preserve sat as you drop or increase, you know, like local contrast or local tonal value. I get why that's sometimes appealing. I just feel like for it to be a fixed thing that's always happening makes the HDR zones kind of problematic for me in a lot of different ways. Okay, what else? Ooh, Mohammed, how would you go from AcesCG to DaVinci Intermediate? I'm glad you asked. I would do so very simply. This is something that I feel like is, I don't know why, if it's like just like ACES making itself, if it's like there's just so much like stigma around ACES of like, oh, you have to do it, you have to do ACES in the ACES way. But like, it's very simple. AcesCG, the primaries for that are AP1, the gamma is linear, and we want to go to DaVinci Intermediate. DaVinci wide gamut, DaVinci Intermediate. Tone mapping off. Make sure your white point adaptation is on, because this has a different white point than this. This is around a D60, a little bit warmer. This is around a D65, a little bit cooler. So make sure that you're accounting for that in your transform. Of course, this looks insane right now because I'm telling a lie. This is not ACES AP1 linear, and it's already in DaVinci wide gamut Intermediate, but you get the point. It's no more difficult than that. And if you needed to supply AcesCG elements to a VFX vendor, you could just swap those like so. All right, what else? Let's see here. Okay, speaking of highlight recovery from Tim, it looks like an interesting compression of highlights happens in HSV with the V channel. Does this have to do with the subtractive model of HSV? Ooh, that's a fun topic to bite off. You guys want to get geeky for a minute? We've got a few minutes left in grade school here. Let's get geeky. So, I got to give a little bit of like context here. So, as you guys know, the ground truth of motion imaging today, anyway, is RGB, right? We have cameras that see red, green, and blue. They have buckets, literally, for red, green, and blue that get filled up depending on the scene that's being placed in front of that sensor, right? So we start with a red, green, and a blue record, right? End of the rainbow, end of the chain, what are we doing? We're going out to a display which has red, green, and blue emitters, right? So red, green, blue is the ground truth of motion imaging in 2024. When I say red, green, blue is the ground truth of motion imaging, it might be a little bit clearer what I mean if I tell you some things that are not the ground truth of motion imaging. Here are some things that are not the ground truth of motion imaging. Luminance, saturation, value, brightness, hue. None of these things are the ground truth. Cameras don't see hue, displays don't show hue natively. We can derive these concepts from RGB, but the ground truth is RGB. So what Tim is talking about is the V channel of HSV, which is a form of luminance channel. And we can look at just within that realm of like, hey, how do I calculate luminance from my RGB? There's like a lot of different answers to that. There's the like fully geeky, what you could call colorimetric answer to that, which is that you need to know the color space that you're in. You need to linearize or decode any log curve that you have, and then transform into the XYZ color space. And then essentially the Y of your XYZ, the cap Y as it's sometimes called, that's your luminance channel. That's how you calculate or derive your luminance channel. But there are a bunch of other ways of calculating or deriving the luminance channel, and we can do kind of like a little tour of them right now. Let's start with resolve. If we go in here to resolve and I flip into monochrome mode, this is the way resolve calculates its luminance channel. And if you want to know how it's getting there, it is mixing. It's saying, hey, I'm going to form a single channel, which will be made up of 70% green, so mostly green, 20-ish% red, and 7% blue. I'm going to sum these together, and that will be my luminance channel. Okay, so we could call this is really derived from a sort of like a conversion to get that cap Y of XYZ that I just talked about. This is derived from a conversion to that, assuming a Rec 709 linear input. The funny thing is, we're virtually never operating on Rec 709 linear material, so strictly speaking, this is wrong. This luminance norm is wrong, but luminance is a derived thing anyway, so I've personally gone way past feeling like, oh, that's definitely right or definitely wrong. You just gotta go with what works. But this is one form of luminance norm right here, okay? Let's look at another form of luminance norm, and we can kind of stack these up. This is one of my favorite things to do, and I can't really explain why, except to give you the anecdote that when I was a small child, I didn't want to play with my Matchbox cars. I just wanted to line them all up and put them in perfect rows. So maybe what I'm about to do will make a little more sense through the context of that cute anecdote about Cullen as a small child. So here is our, like, we could call this a Y, or we could call this a Rec 7 or 9 lum norm. Luminance norm just means luminance channel, okay? Do it like so. We can look at a few others. We could look at, let's look at, I'm going to give you two more to think about. Here's another one. I'm going to convert us into HSL. We're going to do use timeline, and let's go to HSL. Turn this off. I'm going to do a new serial node. I'm going to do a splitter combiner. We have H, S, L. That's our third channel, right? So here is another luminance norm. And if we look at this, you can see it's got different weights to it, right? It's a similar black and white image, but it's not the same at all, right? So we could say here is an HSL luminance norm. Now, let's go back to Tim's question. He was asking about HSV. Let's watch what happens when we go to HSV. It's different, right? That's a third version, and it looks quite different than either of these. So here's our HSV. Can you guys see what I'm talking about with lining up my Matchbox cars and finding that pleasurable for some obtuse reason? There you go. So to go back to Tim's question, why is it, let me actually repeat Tim's question. There's an interesting compression of highlights that happens in HSV. Let's talk about the math a little bit here. I'll give you guys we talked about the math a little bit of this Y, kind of lazy man's cap Y computation that Resolve and many other color correctors use. Let's talk about the math that this uses. It's very different. What the math that's being used here is, instead of saying, hey, I have a pixel. Here's a really good tip for any of you guys who want to get geeky and start thinking about more of the technical or like color sciencey side of things. Boil it down to a single pixel. Don't think about the image. Think about a single pixel. And let's even put our money where our mouth is here. And let's just say I've got this value. And I'm even going to turn off my output transform. Make this really, really simple. Okay? Let's just say I want to look at this like so, and we can even go, yeah, this isn't maybe the perfect example to look at this on, but what I want to look at is the math on the HSV, okay? So I've got a pixel here, And what I'm looking at on this pixel, instead of saying, hey, I've got a pixel which has a certain amount of red, green, and blue in it, when I'm doing HSV, what I'm looking at is, well, put it this way. When I calculate my Rec. 709 norm here, I'm saying, hey, take the red and let it contribute 7% to my forthcoming lume channel. Take the green, let it contribute 70% to my forthcoming lume channel. Take the blue and let it conform, or actually the red should be about 20%, but we're essentially saying, give me an output that is formed by a ratio of A, B, and C from red, green, and blue, okay? In HSV, we're not doing that at all. HSV uses a max RGB scheme, which simply says, hey, look at RGB. Whichever is greatest, that's your luminance norm. And that is what gives us the subtractive thing in HSV. That's what's giving you that feeling of compressed highlights, because you're always just looking at the max of your 3 red, green, and blue values. And that's a luminance norm that is very, very helpful for any time we want to get a so-called subtractive feeling in our image. So that's kind of what's going on there when we look at our HSV math, is it's taking max RGB, and that's why we get subtractive saturation. That's why you get that feeling of compressed highlights that you were talking about a moment ago. Let's turn my display transform back on now, just for fun. That's why you're getting the things that you're describing, essentially. I hope that was a fun detour into color science geekery. I love thinking about the way that luminance norms are computed and the effect that it will have on my processes almost as much as I love thinking about mid-gray, which is a lot. Okay, what else? We got time for another few here. I sometimes disable channel 1 and maybe use luminosity composite mode to affect density as well. Oh, that's interesting. Marcus, is there a way to turn off the list of color spaces scrolling whenever your mouse goes to the bottom or top of the list? Not one that I know of, although the way that I solve that is I use, as you guys may have seen me do, I don't scroll at all. I just will do like, hey, if I'm looking for, whatever, Rec. 709, I just tap R. That way my mouse doesn't get involved, or H for HSL. And then maybe within there, you could, I guess I do still scroll. But I'm using my scroll wheel. For those of you guys who don't know, I think I showed this in my desk setup video. I have my pen on my right here and I have my mouse on my left hand. My mouse, I 99% of the time am just using for the scroll wheel so that I don't have to actually move the mouse. The movement of the cursor happens here, and then I'm just using that for the scrolling feature to do things like this. So that might actually be useful for the particular circumstance that you're describing, Marcus. Oh, Jim, I like your analogy. I use the HDR zone, HDR tool like an audio guy uses EQ. I do the big curves with large roll-off, and then define a narrow zone to do surgery on small areas with other zones. Find it, adjust it, smooth it in. Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing to bring up, and this is something that, for those of you guys who are earlier in your color grading practice, these are great questions to answer for yourself. Is all right, what are my meat and potatoes, primary grading tools that I'm going to use? Whether that's, I like to use a combination of offset and contrast pivot, for example. That is not necessarily my type, but that could be a valid way of saying, hey, I just feel like I get really fast, really effective results by using those tools for my primaries. But then you can ask the question for your secondaries. What are my go-to tools for making narrower tonal adjustments, for example, in the case of Jim's point, or for narrower adjustments in my saturations or my hues? So it's a really fun thing you could kind of stage shootouts like the way we just did with these lume norms and be like, hey, is it the HDR zones? Is it my HSL curves? Is it a qualifier? Is it the color slice tool or Resolve 19? What's the best tool for this job? Which one feels most intuitive to me, and do I get the best results out of? That's a really fun exercise. That's a fun part of, kind of like colorist. You're doing your colorist workout, if you want to call it that, or your colorist training. Okay. Oh wait, where did I feel like I was just scrolling over something from Nicholas. But okay. All right, here we go. Nicholas says, I wanted to try other ways to display transform, but a bit worried with project legacy and backup. Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. I mean, I would say that's worth thinking about. Anytime you start using DCTLs, whether it's for like display transforms or anything else, you need to make sure that you're maintaining a very like sensible ecosystem of LUTs and DCTLs that have backups, and you have a way of like, hey, even if I'm retiring this, it's going someplace where the name is staying consistent and it's readily accessible if I do, like unbox a project from like 2 years ago and I need all the dependent DCTLs and stuff. So there's a little bit of effort there, but not too much, I would say. Kamarli, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I recently shot an event where I used 2 cameras from the same brand, but the footage from the B cam is extremely dark compared to the A cam. How would you fix this? Well, I would put it to you guys, but if we kind of tear a page out of the Colorist 10 Commandments, I would fix it as broadly and simply as possible. I would start by, of course, color managing the entire project, and I would start by looking at how much of this can I solve simply by adjusting my exposure. And what you may find is I cannot fully bring up my B cam to match my A cam, because by the time I push the exposure that hard, the B cam is falling apart. So what does that mean? That means you have to grade down your A cam a little bit. Let's say your B cam is 2 stops under and you can only go about 3/4 of a stop up before it starts to tear. That means that you need to drop a stop and a quarter from your A cam so that they can kind of meet in the middle. So that's what I would think about that, is like, how much of this can I solve with exposure, and then start working on your contrast. But just those 2 things, your go-to exposure tool and your go-to contrast tool, should be able to get you like 90% of the way there to getting a good match. And as I said, sometimes it's not just a matter of like, how do I get the less desirable image up to meet the more desirable image? Sometimes it's a matter of like, how do I dumb down the more desired image to meet the best of what I can do with the more problematic image? Hope that helps. Okay, we're gonna do one more here. Wow, that went really fast. As it always does. Let's see here. Oh, Frank, I use the HSL node for saturation, but I get bad results with HSV. Am I doing something wrong? I wouldn't say so. I mean, good or bad are, of course, like qualitative, relative terms. The one thing I would say that I feel like comes up in YouTube comments fairly often, got to make sure you're tagged properly here. If this is not tagged properly, tagging here and going into HSV is going to make for really wonky results. But if we just look at, I don't know, Frank, if you're using like gain or gamma or a combo of the 2, but like for my taste in general, if I'm in HSV here and I kick off my channels like we usually do for this mode, in general, I prefer what I get here than in HSL. Although another thing that came up in comments this past week, I think, like here's HSL, there's HSV. HSV is just a little bit deeper, right? But another thing that came up in comments this week that I thought was interesting is the rules kind of flip when you are going backwards. So if you want to desaturate and you want to get that feeling of like, oh, as I'm adjusting my saturation, which in this case is negative, I want the image to get darker, just aesthetically, that's your preference, then HSL is actually a better choice. Because if we go negative on our HSL, like something like this, and I grab a still of this and compare it to HSV, the HSV is actually going to be brighter. The HSL will be a little bit darker. So it kind of flips and works the opposite direction when you're going negative. Now, what are you modeling when you are saying, I want color being pulled out to create a net decrease in luminance? Maybe you're modeling nothing. It might just be an aesthetic thing, and it might be that it's more principled to pull in an HSV and then trim your exposure in another spot. But it's still worth noting that property that it kind of flips when you go negative on your saturation. Now let's do one more. We had a bumpy start today. I feel like we haven't gotten our fair share of grade school yet today. Let's take a couple more questions. Topic suggestions. Pixel Surgeon, you might have been asking that question of Frank rather than of me. Gain for saturation increase in HSV. And yeah, Tim, good answer. You can use gain and gamma, but not lift or offset. That's right, because lift or offset are going to move 0. what does it mean when you increase the saturation of something that has no saturation, meaning the saturation channel is 0? Nothing sensible, of course. So gamma is going to bend in the middle, gain is going to adjust the top, so that's exactly right. You can also use custom curves as long as you don't move 0. Let's see. Would gamma be more mid-tone related? When it comes to saturation, no. Here's the fun thing. Gamma is only related to midtones in the sense that when we are in RGB, this is related to the middle of our red, green, and blue channels, which indeed represents very loosely midtones. But when we're in HSV, here's where it gets tricky. In HSV, the simplest translation would be to say, oh, instead of affecting middle tonality, I'm affecting middle saturations. The thing is, in HSV and in most other saturation models, when you're using them in the way we typically do here on the channel, your saturation channel really doesn't have a full healthy signal that runs from 0 to 1. So when you do gamma, you're really affecting most of the saturation, not just the so-called middle, while excluding the low end and the high end in the more like in the way that you expect highlights and shadows to be less affected when you adjust gamma in RGB, just because the saturation channel in general is a little bit, it's not nearly as robust as like a red, green, or a blue channel. A little weaker. Okay, what else? We'll do a few more here. Naveen, I have a Rec 709 monitor. Can I grade in DaVinci wide gamut, convert to Rec 2020 for my output, then convert to Rec 709 for grading? I'll remove the Rec 709 conversion before render. Let's see. Sure, you can do that. Here's the thing that I would say. Like, I would say a few things. Here's the biggest thing. I've got beef. I've got beef with Rec 2020. Rec 2020 is meaningless. Rec 2020 is a display standard for which no display can meet. So it doesn't mean anything, right? Like, it's like saying, I can't even think of a good analogy. Rec 2020 is meaningless. There is no display on the planet that can reproduce 100% of Rec 2020, and yet it is framed solely as a display color space. It is not framed as a working color space. So Rec 2020 is a nothing burger, in my opinion. There are archival reasons for using it, I guess. There are, in my world, reasons for using it because for whatever dumb reasons, streamers want things in that format so that they're future-proofed, which is a whole other nothing burger that I could talk about in its own right. But essentially, to answer your question, yes, if you want a Rec 2020 master, you could go to Rec 2020, then go to Rec 709 for your Rec 709 display, then turn that transform off, and theoretically you have the same grade being pushed out to the Rec 2020 color space. But if you can't see it, then it's kind of tough to have any confidence that you're sending anything out, especially because it's not just you who can't see it, it's nobody. Nobody can see Rec 2020. And that's why what's most common when you hear someone say, oh, we mastered in Rec 2020, is you actually master what's called Rec 2020 P3 limited, which essentially means that you are confining yourself, even though you're in Rec 2020, you're confining yourself to P3, which is a smaller color space and is a color space that displays can reproduce 100% of. So at that point, my question is, why don't you just master P3? But what do I know? I'm not responsible for developing standards and all these things. So short answer to your question, yes. Maybe the better answer would be like, well, why do you need a Rec 2020 master at all? And what are your goals for that Rec 2020 master? If it's just for archival, then you might be better off with a what's called graded archival master, a GAM, where you just like turn everything downstream of your working color space and your grade off, and then you can target any new fancy, like as of yet uncreated color space in the future that you want to. So that's kind of how I would think about that. But Rec 2020 in general, like I said, I've got beef. And until someone is paying you to deal with its nonsense, I would kind of encourage avoiding it and going like, wait, what's the simpler path here? We're just trying to master images for displays. There is no display that can accommodate Rec 2020, so why in the world would I complicate my workflow by using it? Again, unless someone is paying you to do so, which is an acceptable reason in my opinion. I hope that helps. I hope that's not too salty. Feeling a little bit salty today. Okay, let's wrap it there, guys. Really good conversation. Great seeing you guys. Thanks for bearing with the bumpy start, and glad we got to do it from my casa here today. Really good hanging out with you guys. We got more content coming in here on the channel super soon, and I'm excited to talk about DRTs, as I mentioned, and a bunch of other brand new topics or topics that we have explored precious little of up until now. Lots of fun stuff coming in the back half of 2024. So looking forward to sharing it with you guys and talking about it with you guys in grade school. Have a great rest of your week, guys. Good to see you.